Every autumn, the same ritual repeats itself across backyards and fields. Branches are dragged into piles. Leaves are raked and stacked. A match is struck, and within hours, years of stored water, carbon, and fertility vanish into smoke. What looks like tidying up is, in reality, the destruction of something that took decades to build. Free irrigation, free fertilizer, free resilience, all erased in a single afternoon. But high in the Alps, where winters bite hard and snow lingers long after spring arrives, one farmer refused to light the match. Instead of burning wood, he buried it. And in a place where frost kills citrus and drought punishes even grass, he harvested lemons beneath falling snow. This was not a trick, not a greenhouse illusion. It was a system so powerful it worked for 20 years without irrigation, without fertilizer, and without collapse. A system modern agriculture quietly walked away from. The man's name was Sepp Holzer. He never planned to become a symbol of defiance. He was born into farming, into steep Austrian mountains where the land does not forgive mistakes. The soil was thin. The slopes were unforgiving. Machinery struggled to hold its ground. Like many farmers before him, Holzer was taught to fight nature into submission. Straight lines, flat terraces. Approved crops, follow the rules or pay the price. At first he tried. The harvests failed anyway, so he did something most farmers are never taught to do. He stopped listening to instructions and started watching the land itself. How snow melted, where water pooled, which plants survived without help, which soils stayed damp long after rain. What he saw contradicted everything written in manuals. In forests, fallen trees did not rot uselessly. They became sponges. In valleys, debris slowed water instead of letting it escape. On slopes untouched by machines, fertility accumulated rather than washed away. Holzer began to imitate the forest. In the early 1980s, he started piling logs directly onto the ground. Old trunks, branches, brushwood, whatever the mountains offered. Over them, he layered leaves, manure, grass, and soil, shaping the piles into long, gentle mounds that followed the contours of the hillside. He planted directly into them. The response was immediate and controversial. Inspectors arrived with clipboards. They measured slopes, counted ponds, documented every mound of soil that did not conform to regulation. His neighbors watched from flat, uniform fields, shaking their heads. They planted approved varieties in straight rows and relied on irrigation lines and fertilizer deliveries. Holzer planted citrus trees where only spruce had grown. Officials called it dangerous. They warned of erosion, landslides, and flooding. They fined him for illegal earthworks, then fined him again for water retention ponds dug without permission. Some years, dozens of fines arrived, thousands in penalties. Holzer smiled through it. "I am the most fined farmer," he liked to say, letting the words twist into a joke only half concealed. But the fines did not stop him. They sharpened his resolve. After heavy alpine rains in 1986, authorities accused his terraces of trapping water illegally. Holzer paid, then appealed, arguing that his land absorbed water instead of shedding it, that his ponds prevented floods rather than caused them. The pressure mounted. By the end of the decade, the Agricultural Board threatened to seize his farm entirely. That was the moment Holzer stopped arguing with words and invited them to look at the land. What they saw was impossible to ignore. Lemons hung bright against snow-dusted hillsides. Kiwi vines climbed alongside pines, their fruit swelling in cold mountain air. Grapes ripened on slopes where neighbors barely grew hay. Root vegetables pushed deep into soil so loose and dark it smelled alive. No irrigation lines ran across the terraces. No fertilizer bags lay stacked by sheds. The harvest was 10 times higher than surrounding farms. Evidence replaced argument. One fine followed another, but the tone changed. Inspectors brought cameras instead of citations. The land itself had become testimony. At the heart of this transformation lay a simple structure hidden beneath the soil. Buried wood. Each mound was built like a forest floor turned inside out. Large logs formed the core, stacked tightly to eliminate voids. Smaller branches filled gaps, leaves, manure, and green plant matter supplied nitrogen. Everything was capped with soil and mulch. As seasons passed, the logs began to rot. And that decay changed everything. Rotting wood is not waste, it is architecture. The internal structure of wood is a maze of microscopic channels designed to move water when the tree is alive. When fungi begin breaking down lignin and cellulose, those channels open wider, turning each log into a sponge. Not figuratively, physically. Studies measuring decomposed pines show it can hold more than 5 times its dry weight in water. Oak, slower to decay, still absorbs 2 to 3 times its mass. Buried underground, these logs swell with rain and snowmelt, locking moisture away from evaporation. In midsummer, when topsoil cracks and fields turn brittle, a hügelkultur mound stays damp at its core. Moisture probes pushed deep into these beds routinely measure 40 to 60% water content long after surface soil has dried. Roots find what hoses cannot reach, and the benefits do not stop at water. As microbes and fungi digest the wood, their activity releases heat. Decay is an exothermic process. Each microbial meal sends warmth into the surrounding soil. In alpine climates, this warmth can mean the difference between life and death for seedlings. On Holzer's terraces, frost arrived early. But beneath citrus trees, the ground stayed warm enough for roots to function. Spring came sooner, autumn lingered longer. The growing season stretched itself without plastic or glass. Each mound became a microclimate. This slow breakdown also created something modern agriculture rarely achieves: long-term fertility without depletion. Hardwoods take decades to fully decompose. Over that time, they release nutrients gradually, matching the pace of plant demand. Nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, trace minerals fed into the soil not in sudden surges, but as a steady background flow. No leaching, no runoff. No dependency, fungal networks spread through the wood like living highways, moving nutrients upward to plant roots. Earthworms tunneled through softened logs, mixing organic matter into soil and leaving behind castings richer than anything in a bag. The mound fed itself. By the time most farms required annual fertilizer just to maintain yields, Holzer's soil grew richer each year. It was here, walking through these terraces, that many later chroniclers of regenerative agriculture first understood what had been forgotten. Not abandoned because it failed, but because it did not fit machines. After 1920, agriculture reorganized itself around steel and speed. Tractors needed flat ground. Harvesters required uniform rows. Any mound, any obstacle became inefficiency. Fields were leveled, brush was burned. Water was drained away instead of slowed. Soil became something to manage chemically rather than biologically. The logic worked, briefly. But it came with costs that grew invisible until they were unavoidable. Dependence on irrigation, rising fertilizer prices, soils that collapsed without constant input. The old systems, built on decay and patience, could not compete with quarterly yields. They faded quietly. Today, as drought tightens and fertilizer costs soar, those forgotten systems are being rediscovered by people with no choice but to look again. Gardeners bury brush piles instead of burning them. Urban growers turn storm-fallen trees into serpentine beds. Homesteaders build mounds once and abandon their hoses by the second summer. One retired teacher noticed her water bill dropped so sharply the city questioned her meter. Another gardener watched yellow seedlings recover within weeks after adding nitrogen-rich greens to a mound starved by fresh wood. Mistakes become lessons. Lessons become proof. The science now supports what forests always knew: moisture retention, thermal buffering, nutrient cycling, microbial abundance. Hügelkultur is not an invention, it is an imitation, a way of letting dead wood finish its work underground. This story belongs in places like Hidden Nature Vault, not because it is mystical or forbidden, but because it reveals how much was set aside in the rush toward efficiency. Not everything abandoned was wrong. Some things were simply too slow to monetize. Today, millions still burn what could feed soil for generations. Branches reduced to ash while gardens crack in the sun. The irony is almost painful. Every buried log is an act of patience. Every mound a quiet refusal to depend entirely on external inputs. In a world chasing faster solutions, hügelkultur offers something radical: resilience that grows stronger with time. Lemons and snow are not a miracle, they are a reminder. The land does not ask to be conquered, it asks to be understood. Music softens, warm and reflective. If this story changed the way you see fallen wood, soil, or the seasons themselves, stay with us. There are more forgotten systems waiting beneath the surface, quiet, patient, and ready to be remembered.